Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Hawken, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm Katie Olthoff, the co-founder of ChopLocal and ChopLocal University. And our topic today is one that I think is really, really interesting. It is SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization. And I am joined here today with a colleague who, Kelly and I have known each other online, or at least I've been following her online for a really long time, kind of ran in the same circles. And most recently, we've gotten the opportunity to work with Kelly on SEO projects for ChopLocal for the online marketplace. So thank you, Kelly, for joining us today. I'm excited to hear some more of your advice for farmers and butcher shops that are setting up their own websites.
Yeah, it's great to be here. So, as Katie said, we've known each other for years, basically through online circles. Have we ever been in the same place at the same time?
I don't think we've ever been in the same room. No.
No, I think we have been ships passing in the night, probably very close. But to Katie's point, I have been working in search engine optimization for nearly 15 years now and have really gotten to enjoy doing a lot of it in the original industry that really shaped my career, agriculture. So as a result, I've gotten to develop this really unique perspective on how rural businesses, food and ag businesses especially, can grow and thrive in an ever shifting and constantly evolving landscape like search engines.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's not just agriculture, but you've done a lot around food as well, right?
Yeah. I actually was just forming a plan of attack with a restaurant in Durham, North Carolina, but then have also worked with, some small like direct to consumer brands scattered all over the US. I've gotten to work with actually Jack Stack, one of the largest barbecue chains here in Kansas City. Like when you think Kansas City barbecue, Jack Stack is one of the restaurants you think of. So getting to do some like data research and discovery with them was kind of a feather in my cap as a food and ag and foodie nerd. Trying to think what other food and ag projects I've worked on that are like more specific to the butcher space. But honestly, I've touched so many things over the years that it's hard to keep track of them all.
Yeah, yeah, and you are an avid meat eater as well, which is one thing that, we like to hear. So, yeah.
Big fan of it.
Yeah. All right. So, what I want to get into today is really like for farmers and butchers setting up their own websites. Like, what can they do that will help them in search? But I think before we even get into that, we need to talk about the importance of search and how maybe it's changing or not changing. There's a lot of buzz about AI right now, and does that make search engine optimization irrelevant? I guess, what are your thoughts kind of around all of that?
Yeah, so to start off, I want to do a little bit of an explanation of sort of what search engine optimization is and what it isn't. And then that will kind of ladder into its relationship to AI and what we call large language models like ChatGPT and Perplexity. But ultimately, search engine optimization is basically finding your users where they're looking for answers online. And I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just using keywords, but it's multifaceted. A few years ago, there was this trendy buzzword called omni-channel SEO that I was kind kind of considered an expert in, which is kind of cool to talk about, but at the same time, like it's already search changes so fast that that phrase is already outdated, and this was 6 years ago. So the idea of sort of the all-encompassing full funnel or omni-channel search experience is that your users are looking for you in a variety of ways at any given time. So you may have the user that's got like Google Maps pulled up on their phone and they're searching for a local business nearby and they want artisan, you know, small batch turkey breast or something like that for an upcoming barbecue where they want to have smoked turkey breast as the primary entree. So maybe they're looking for you on Google Maps, or maybe they're actually on Google looking for, independent butchers near me, or best ribeye cut in Kansas City, which I mean that's Kansas City is probably not a good sample size because everybody loves meat here. There's meat everywhere you look. But ultimately, people are looking everywhere, and they may not even necessarily be looking on Google. They may be hopping into Apple Maps, and people don't think of Apple Maps as a search engine, but it is. And there's all of these different moving pieces that can populate your business in these particular locations. And that's just talking about local search alone. When we start talking about regular, like sitting on Google looking for answers to questions, that's a whole other facet of SEO. And when we start talking about that type of SEO, we get into the world of websites. And whereas local search is very heavily like managing your listings on Google Business Profile or managing your listing on Apple Maps or Bing Places, or even something like Yelp or TripAdvisor or any of these other sort of travel and tourism and lifestyle focused directory sites. The listings management side of it is one element of SEO, but then your website is this whole other entity and this whole other approach to SEO, where we have to start thinking about things like, is your website built in such a way that search engines can read it? And if search engines can read it, are you using the words your customers would use?
Let's just pause for a second because you and I have had this discussion, which you kind of thought was hilarious, but this goes into keyword research, which we can talk more about later maybe. But a few years ago in ChopLocal, I was doing some keyword research and realized that we have a lot of farmers that want to sell what they call half a beef or half a steer or freezer beef, right? But when I started to do the keyword research, customers were using the phrase half a cow. And we know, like in agriculture or in meat, like half a cow is not exactly what desirable. That's not exactly what you probably want, right? But that's what customers were using. So, like you said, are you using terms that like your customers are actually using?
And sometimes it makes you want to die a little bit inside when you know better.
Yeah, because sometimes I think people look at Chop Local, like farmers probably are like, do these people even know what they're talking about? They say half a cow on here, you know? But the reason that we're doing that is because that's how we can connect with consumers.
Yeah. Well, and so case in point, like our county fair is going on right now. There's gonna be the steer auction. You and I can go to that and know we're bidding on steers or may possibly heifers, although I think most of the heifers that pass through there are gonna end up being replacement heifers that are held back. But we're going, if we were to go to the auction where they have animals on hoof being bid on, like I know their steer, you know their steer. The person that owns like a small business in the area that's bidding on one as a charity contribution to the community may not necessarily know they're called steer.
Right, right.
They may just be like, hey, I'm gonna buy a crud ton of beef from a 4-H'er to support my community and do a nice thing. So they may be sitting there in the bleachers at the auction thinking, I'm gonna buy this cow. You just gotta use the language they know.
So, as you and I tend to do, we kind of went off on a tangent here into keyword research and using the language that that customers.
It's a hot button topic all the time.
It is in agriculture, and it's something that like Like, I did not grow up in agriculture, and so I didn't used to know those terms. And so maybe it's a little bit easier for me. But I see that a lot on websites where farms will say, we have a cow calf operation, or we finish our cattle. Like, those things don't. I didn't know what that meant when I was just a beef customer before I started working with farmers. So let's file that as one of the tips that we can take away is think about and think about, sorry, okay, again, like I'm starting to go off on a tangent, but one of the things that I've always heard,
We're getting passionate here.
yeah, one of the things I've always heard about SEO, and I completely believe is true, is that like if you write for humans, it will naturally help your SEO, right? Like, we don't want to write just for SEO. We also want it to be understandable for humans. And if you make it really understandable for humans, it should also help your SEO. And this is one way that you can do that. So think about those phrases that they are using, include those in your writing on your website or in your listings on those different platforms. So, like I said, we'll file that as a takeaway. Let's go back to listing management for a minute. So, Google is the biggest search engine, right? So, your Google business profile, even if you don't have a website, that's something that farms and butcher shops can use to help show up in Google search, right? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so typically on a large search engine like Google, there is going to be information about your business, whether you've supplied it or not. And the best thing you can do for your visibility and the quality of your listing is claim it and curate it. So just based on the fact that like Google can go out and learn about, entities in the community, if people have looked for you, Google probably understands that there is some sort of brand that exists there. So say I'm gonna go agritourism just because this is something I know. There's a really well-known farm in the Bloomington, Illinois area that is a Jersey cheese and butter farm. You can go, you can pet calves. They've got like a petting zoo and all sorts of stuff, but they also sell D2C beef. They sell, I think they do small batch poultry. They sell cheese, they sell butter. They are like most Chop Local customers, I think, in some respect, in that they have a very diversified approach to their business, but they have a brick and mortar location people can go to either to buy things or just have a good time as a family. It's been years since I was there, but it was a really, really cute little operation. So, say this brand wanted to make sure that people could find them on Google. They could go on, they could look for themselves on Google, search their own name, and it will likely populate a business listing. And if they don't already own that business listing, there's usually an option in the business listing to say, claim this business listing or manage this listing or something to that respect. So if you go and Google yourself and find that there is a business entity for yourself that you have not been managing, claim it. And you can update it and put all of the most accurate information in. I recommend including photos. If there is, a combination of there's building exteriors, there's building interiors, there's office space, there's storefront, upload pictures of all of those things. If you just have a small storefront that's a little tiny corner of maybe like your main building where you're operating out of, just put some pictures of your storefront with some inventory showing or something. Or if you've got a larger operation and there's tours or there's a petting zoo or there's, an entire like pop-up store that lives there all the time and you have other partners that you're selling materials for, just show people what's there. Show people what to expect when they show up. And make sure you include externals of your business as well, because if they're driving up to your place, you want them to know that they're getting to the right spot.
So, can I share two little stories about this real quick?
Absolutely. It brings it to life, it makes it applicable.
We have a friend and customer. When I say customer, she buys meat from Chop Local vendors, and she has a little She was a personal chef out of her kitchen for years and years, opened a brick and mortar in the Des Moines area this last year, and does like freezer meals, does catering, that kind of stuff. Has a commercial kitchen now. And I went in shortly after she opened. She had a Google business profile. She is managing it, meaning that she can write her own description. Like you said, she can add her own photos, but customers can add photos too. So I went in and I took some photos inside and I posted a review and posted my photos to her Google business profile, like as a customer. And I remember getting an email. Of course, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but a few months later, I got an email that my photos had been seen like 10,000 times or something like that by
Yeah.
people that were searching. And I was like, that took me like literally maybe a minute and a half to do this whole process. And 10,000 people got a glimpse of the types of meals that she was offering inside of her store. Like, that's so powerful and so much easier than creating an entire website, which she has that too. So, your Google business profile. Okay, the other example, my daughter is a dancer. You know that, Kelly, but maybe not everybody that listens does. And in a dance group that I'm in on Facebook, it's an Iowa Dance Moms group or something like that. There was a gal who said, I have a little dance boutique, again, right outside of Des Moines. You know, was kind of like, I have a little dance boutique, would love for you guys to come in and check it out sometime. I looked for her on Google. There's no pictures of the exterior, so I really can't place where it's at in the town, you know. There's no pictures of the interior either. So when I looked at it, and on her social media, same, like, again, I'm trying not to get too off track, but on social media also, all of her social media were cute little Canva designs, but I want to see, like, do you have only little ballerina dresses, or do you also have the cool two-piece outfits that are in bright colors that my daughter and her friends love? You know, how extensive is your dance shoe collection that you have? Like, these are things that if she posted pictures of the inside of her store, I could get a much better idea of what to expect and whether it was worth an hour drive for me to come into. And those could be on Google business profile, those could be on her website, which she didn't have, and it could be on her social media. But really, like, ideally, as a potential customer trying to decide whether to come, I wanted to see those pictures of what it looked like inside. So,
Yep. And it's always about adding context and building trust. And I think one of the big things that we recognize when we're talking about things like artisan or small batch or independent like food production, part of the reason people care about this is they want to feel connected. They want to they want to feel like they can trust the producers that they're buying from and that there's a really like impactful story and level of like commitment to community. And they get that on the front end if they're curating their online presence well enough to show it. You know, I honestly like most of the independent meat sellers that I've worked with, either through ChopLocal or independently, they're out in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know if you have ever had the experience of driving up to a strange farm with zero expectation of what's going to happen when you get there. But like, I'm sure there are probably some people coming out from town that want to just buy their really, really good pork ribs or, you know, really like grass finished beef or whatever it is that drove them to buy independently versus from a grocery store or a more local butcher. If they're going down a gravel road here in Banjos and they don't know what they're looking for because there's no pictures of the place online, I would be a little bit nervous about that too. And I grew up in a town of 3,000 people.
yeah, it's the opposite of me thinking about driving an hour into town to go to this little boutique. They're thinking about coming from town out into the country, right? But yeah,
Yep. So all that to say, think about where people might be looking for you and curate your presence there to make sure that they're not surprised by what they're going to find. So, I mean, we talked a lot about local listings, and that's just one aspect of SEO. But for the most part, when we talk about SEO, we're really talking about knowing where customers could be looking and just equipping yourself to be found in those places. And it's not always just search engines. People forget that the second largest search engine on earth is YouTube.
Mm-hmm. And we've been talking lately about Pinterest, and we're going to have an episode in this season of the podcast about Pinterest. Pinterest is a search engine also. So, yeah. And I just read news recently that Instagram posts can now show up in Google searches too. So, that's another kind of you mentioned earlier omni-channel, like search happens everywhere, right?
Yeah. And I mean, Facebook is considered a search engine as well. Now, people are using Facebook differently than maybe they're using places searches on Google, but they're still looking for answers on these different channels. So, reeling it all the way back to AI, recent research, everyone says AI is everywhere, and it is. But recent research is showing that only about 10% of the current like online query load, so people who are going online and typing into a text box on a search engine, on social media, on YouTube, all this stuff, less than 10% of that is actually happening on your large AI chatbots like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Pi or whatever else you're using, Claude. Now we know that that's happening, but we also know that the way those search bots or those chatbots are searching for information is using search engines.
They're still trying to read your website and get the information from it, right?
Fun fact, ChatGPT, I want to say more than 80% of their information is gathered from Bing. So if you're thinking about a really well search optimized website, chances are you are also going to be well optimized for these chatbots, these AI chatbots. Now, where we talk about AI in search and it gets a little wishy-washy is when we're talking about actual AI within search engines.
Okay, yeah. Like where I Google, like if I Googled, what's the best pork roast for pulled pork? Google might bring up a little AI summary that it pulls from other websites, right?
We're seeing an increase in what we call zero-click search, which is where Google is trying to give you information as a user without you being required to click through to any websites. Now, as a business owner, that's terrifying because so many of my clients get the vast majority of their traffic from Google. And if people aren't clicking on things in Google, they're not going to the websites where they can possibly convert. The kicker is there. So we know that roughly, I want to say it's probably up to about 20% of all searches now have an AI overview. And in searches where the AI overview is present, anywhere from 30 to 70% of clicks are going to that instead of the websites underneath. But in the last few months, Google has started allowing link citations within their AI overviews.
So it'll tell me like this is the best pork roast, but then it'll put a little link there that says this is where we found that information, right?
Yep. So say ChopLocal has a blog post that's about, get the best pulled pork of your life. Here's the best cuts for it, or something like that. And it would offer that as a source, a little citation, just itty bitty next to the information that the AI overview is showing. But we also know that some there's some like hedging your bets around AI overviews. One, to ensure that there's a chance you're going to be the AI overview citation, but also knowing the kind of queries that populate those. So you're more likely to get an AI overview if you're looking for a how-to or a recipe or something like you're comparing businesses side by side. Google loves to show AI overviews for, tell me the difference between grocery store A and grocery store B, and it'll pull up things like ratings and customer reviews and business statistics that it has access to. And we're actually in the SEO world now recommending some of our clients will actually, when it makes sense, build pages where it's like, here's us compared to the competition.
Interesting. Interesting. That's always been a little bit of a strategy because you could like let's say let's just use ButcherBox as a competitor for ChopLocal. Like we could always have made a page that said like how is ChopLocal different from ButcherBox? And with the idea that if somebody searches butcher box, maybe this page will show up and they'll get that alternative, right? But but okay, so going back to my search, but if I'm a customer, okay, I decide, okay, I need a Boston butt for my pork, my pulled pork. Now, in my customer terms, I'm going to search pig farms near me, right? That's likely to bring up that business profile that we have been talking about, right? Versus an AI overview, maybe. Maybe?
Yeah. And where that gets tricky too is Google viewing the search pig farms near me as someone wanting to see pigs or as someone wanting to buy pork. And there's always that question of how is Google interpreting your query as well. And Google does personalized search. So if you have an ongoing interest in live pigs, like I periodically fall into rabbit holes where I'm curious about breeds of livestock that I don't personally have experience with. So I went into this like thing where I was comparing like Duroc pigs to other breeds just because I think they're cool looking.
Sure, why not? It's very interesting, isn't it?
So rant. I love livestock breeds. I think it's so cool. It comes from my 4-H days of doing genetics projects. But like because I may have been at one point in time searching a bunch about Duroc pigs, Google might be like, hey, if she's looking for a pig farm, she probably wants pigs. Whereas Google also has to recognize, hey, this person's been searching for a lot of recipes lately. Maybe they're looking specifically for pig farms that sell direct to consumer pork on location. And that's part of the interesting thing of knowing your customers and why we might recommend, as an SEO strategist, say I'm working with a pig farmer that has direct to consumer on their farm. I may want them to have pages about how they raise their pigs and what kind of pig farm they are and what are the philosophies they use when they're raising their pigs and how many generations have they been there and what row crops do they also grow to feed their pigs. Like that might be information I have here to serve one intent, the people looking for pig information. But then I would also be like, hey, let's talk about your pork. I want a page about, your philosophy on what produces high quality pork. I want a page about the butchers you partner with to get your pork processed. I want a page about, what actual types of pork do you sell? Are you talking like half hogs or are we talking individual cuts, like down to, hey, you want some ham hocks? You want something to cook with some beans, or like the really niche stuff that like no one thinks about buying unless they really really want it. I'm not going to the grocery store and thinking about specialty cuts of pork, but if someone's looking for that online and you've written about it on your website, you might be positioned for it depending on what Google thinks a pig farm in specific might mean. So very, very clear as mud, very, very clear cut, and not at all like nuance specialization.
What I'm thinking about though is again, what's good for humans is good for search because one of the mistakes that I see on so many farms' websites again is they get really detailed about their production practices and maybe it is about their breed of pig that they're raising and their production practices and things like that, but they never translate it into how it benefits the customer. So if we're talking about Duroc pigs, we want to talk about the fact that this breed is known for excellent quality pork. It has more marbling inside. It's not the same as the lean pork that you might find at the grocery store. It's a heritage breed, and this provides you with a different eating experience. So if this is what you're looking for, that's what we can provide. And that goes right along with what you're saying about if you're trying to sell pigs, then maybe going into the production practices makes sense to your customer. But if you're selling pork, you want to talk more about the pork. Yes, people want to know about how your animals are housed and they want to know those types of things, but you got to talk about the pork because that's at the end of the day what they're putting in their mouths and what they're looking for.
Another big caveat and watch out I always bring up when we're talking about selling a product online is this seems like this seems like common sense to me. But more and more, I'm seeing a lot of small producers who either aren't as well versed in digital strategy, or they're just so busy trying to do it all on their own. And they're tossing product information into images. So one of the big watchouts is search engines don't read text on images.
Okay, so you're saying if I use Canva and I like have a picture of my pork roast and I put text on that image and it says like it's a 3.5 pound pork roast and you know, you're saying Google or Bing or any of the search DuckDuckGo, they can't read the text on that image.
Bingo. So what we recommend doing is don't not use the text on the image. We know that text and images is great for social media as well, but make sure that if you're going to have that product posted somewhere on your website, include it in text. Don't just rely on the image. And unfortunately, that's because it's so easy. You log on to Canva and you're like, oh, I'm going to create this promotional image and I'm just going to stick it on my website. Search has no idea that the text exists in that image. It might find the image, it might serve it as an image search result, but it's not going to hit the people that are actually looking for stuff. So that is pretty important in providing context as well, because search gets no context from images.
So let's talk more about images because there are several things that you can do when you are putting images on your website that will help with search. And I want to know, I know it's probably hard to rank them, like what's most important and what's not, but some of the things that I know are best practices or that I've heard, I should say that I've heard are best practices are things like using a file name for your image that has like some descriptive words in it.
Yep.
Filling in the alt text on the image, like when you upload an image to your website, there's often a field that says alt text, and so filling that in. Keeping your image file sizes low. I think our guideline that we try to keep it under is like 200 kilobytes, but you can tell me if that's right or wrong.
The answer is it depends.
Okay, I think those are probably the three biggest things, unless I'm forgetting anything. So give me your thoughts. Yay or nay, worth your time? Am I on the right track?
So file name and alt text, absolutely. Anytime you can include descriptive words that are consumer friendly, customer friendly, do it. Especially because alt text isn't just good for search engines, it's good for accessibility. More and more, we're finding that technology is a way for people who are differently abled to interact with the world around them. They're doing a lot of online shopping, they're doing a lot of research online because previously there was information that they had to ask for other people to provide for them, or information they just never got. And now we have this wonderful technology where a computer can read a website to them out loud. Well, obviously they're not going to see images on a website, but they can hear the computer reading the alt text to them. So the file name and the alt text are not only something that those screen readers can read, but we also operate on the assumption if a screen reader can read it, so can a search engine crawler, a search engine bot. So in a lot of corners of SEO, we say that if it's accessible, if it is friendly for these technologies that allow visually impaired people to use the website, it is also search friendly.
Again, what's good for people is good for search, right? So,
Bingo. And it's you wouldn't think like, oh, I need to find out if my search engine is good for, or my website is good for blind people. That's not like something that you think of when you're starting a website, but it is a really good cross check. If you were to plug your website into some of these tools that will actually tell you whether or not it's friendly for visually impaired users, chances are if you score well with that, you will be very easily findable for search engines. So little kind of advanced SEO tip that we use in the industry is actually checking accessibility of websites to determine crawlability by search engines.
I will tell you my hang up on file names is that like I am working on a website and I'm like, yep, I found the photo that I want to add here and it is named like IMG underscore 6742 X, you know, whatever. And I don't want to interrupt my flow, like my workflow, to go and rename that. So I think what I should do, and you tell me if this is a good recommendation. I think what I should do is like before I start on the website, when I start to gather the photos, like especially when we're working on a client's like a farmer or butcher shop's website, a lot of times they're sending me photos through Google Drive or something like that. Or sometimes I'm downloading them off of their social media with their permission to use on their website. But what I should really do is open up that folder and rename them all before I start uploading them. And probably resize them or at least make a version of them that is smaller for the web as well. That workflow would make me much more likely to actually do this properly on a website.
Agreed. Agreed. And honestly, as far as naming conventions go, okay, so first off, the joke in the SEO industry is the answer to every question is it depends. I say it so many times a day I couldn't like actually keep track of it. But when I talk about things like file size and they say it depends, if you know you need a very, very large, high fidelity image that needs to be able to fill the entire screen, maybe you do need to keep it full size or close to full size. Maybe it's got to be, several kilobytes or megs even of information. There's a time and a place for that. But ultimately, you want your image files to be as small as they can be while still fulfilling the need. And in the case of like really high quality food, if we're talking like cooked food images, you want some detail there because like if I can see like the little glint of like just a little bit of like that fat shining on like a really good steak or like, the glistening of the marble in a high quality pork chop, like that's gonna give me how many times have we been working on the site together and I'm like, Katie, I'm so hungry.
Yes, and oh my gosh, I talk about that. We've talked about that in other episodes and webinars and things. I want that feeling from a website. I want to look at those images and go, that's another thing to think about in your Google business profile, in your, in your social media, on your website. If you don't look at that photo and go, that makes me hungry, pick a different, you need to start over.
Some of the best food photography I've actually seen for direct to consumer, whether it's like a butcher shop that's got like cooked food images on their website or whatever, they partner with food bloggers to get that photography because food bloggers are so good at knowing how to capture their like recipes in like the best possible light, pun intended. Just get good food photos and make sure that they're cropped in size so that people can still see all of that delicious detail, but also you're not drastically slowing down your website and basically making Google slog through getting it loaded. So,
Okay, I have to point people to our YouTube channel right now because we did a webinar. It's been a couple years ago now, but photography principles still apply. We did a webinar with Kelsey Burns from Dance Around the Kitchen because she also is from, I think she worked for the Pork Checkoff, so like knows that meat marketing and now is a food blogger, grew up on a farm. And she did a little webinar for us about how she does her food photography. And you're right, like food bloggers do great photography. I also always have to say this, food bloggers work hard for that photography. And if you right click and save it from a Google search and save that image and use it on your website, they are using tools where they will come and find you. Rightfully so. Do not steal photos from food bloggers, please.
agreed. And first off, the food bloggers can find you. Second, the images don't really benefit you from search because Google recognizes that those are duplicate images, basically stolen from someone else. So use your own original photography anytime you can. Katie, you had mentioned you guys had this webinar about good food photography, partnering with a food blogger. I've known a lot of small businesses that partnered with local food bloggers to get their photography done, checkoffs who use food bloggers all the time. I used to do a lot of work with Kansas pork, and I know we had a really, really robust set of images we could use that were all taken by people in the food blogging and recipe development space. So there are resources out there.
Yeah, or look at those tips and improve your own food photography. An- Another caution that I have though is I have seen sometimes when farmers or butchers send us photos that they've taken with their smartphone. I feel like it's especially iPhones, but it could also be Androids, or maybe I'm mixing it up. But a lot of times those file sizes are absolutely gigantic. And it is a lot. I think it's harder to, not necessarily harder to resize it on your phone, but it is harder to rename it on your phone, I think. Like, I don't even know how I would rename a photo on my phone right now. But if I upload the photo to my computer, it's much easier for me to rename it, check the size, and resize it. And so I guess that's my warning is try not to upload photos directly from your phone to your website because they might be gigantic.
And that comes with like the note of your smartphones can take incredible photos. You can get some actually really good food photography or product photos or photos from around your farm just with an iPhone. This is like an iPhone 12 mini. It's old. It still takes great photos. But the way you manage your files matters. So upload them to your computer, curate them, size them, rename them. When you upload them to your website, make sure you're tagging them appropriately because these are all different steps in the process of optimizing those images to be found online. And it sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot, but in reality, it's seconds per image just to do it right from the start.
Exactly. Do it right from the start so that you're not midway through putting your website together and you're like, oh, I gotta go rename all these images. Okay, here's another thing that I do that I think I'm very clever for doing, and I want you to tell me.
I'm so excited about this.
You have no idea what it is, do you? Okay, I think it's very clever, and I want you to tell me if you think it is worthwhile whatsoever. Okay, so let's say I am doing a farm's website or a butcher shop's website, whichever one, and they have an about page. Almost every website has an about page, right? And we often use Squarespace. I'm sure other platforms make this fairly easy too, but you can go into that page's settings and you can change the URL there. And so what I do a lot of times, instead of it being Katie's Farm slash about, I will make it like Katie's Farm slash about our Iowa farm or about our Iowa pork farm or something like that so that I'm putting some keywords in that URL. And then I love to have, we're not talking, I don't know if we're going to get into title tags and things like that. That might be too technical to get into on a podcast here. We might have to do a follow up. But, I'll put the title of the fit page similar, use the same keywords or similar keywords, but tell me if this strategy of like putting keywords into the URL, again, thinking about the customer and what they might be searching for on Google is clever or is it just cute? I mean,
So I didn't know where you were going with that when you said there was a thing you felt clever about. Here's the thing, you're right. It is clever. So, I mean, in my consulting work, in my day job, because I am at an agency that does all sorts of different business. I work on banks. I work on residential propane distributors. Like
that sounds so boring, but okay, yes.
it's interesting to me because I love what I do. But this is a strategy that the pros are using. Like I do URL strategy. I go in and I make recommendations on the page level of like, hey, before we build this page, let's give it this URL. Now, one watch out for that is once a page exists, if Google knows it exists, you shouldn't change the URL without a really, really, really good reason. Because once you change the URL, it's basically a new page in the eyes of Google. But if it's a relatively young page, it doesn't get a lot of traffic, if you're looking for low-hanging fruit on improving its search relevance, go for the URL. There's a lot of websites out there that have pages that have nothing to lose. If it's not already an established source of traffic, give it a try. Do some URL optimization. And if one of your big marketing points is you do want people to know that you are a local Iowa family farm, Maybe the right URL is about Katie's Iowa Family Farm. Or, if you're wanting to sell heritage Duroc pork, about our Duroc family farm or something like that. I need the caveat to be just because I'm saying something a certain way doesn't mean that's the right URL. We're going off the cuff here. Sometimes these examples are a little more awkward than how they would look in my spreadsheets where I'm doing actual work. But in most cases, if you're thinking about the key phrases you want to be known for, like it's a heritage breed pork farm that raises Durocs, consider making a point of having Duroc in the page address.
Okay, so I'm glad that you verified that that does make sense.
You are clever, Katie.
Thank you so much. The same thing I see just with your entire website URL, like your actual domain. I see a lot of them that will say, again, use an example, Katie's Cattle Farm, or, like Althoff Cattle or something like that. But if my main goal is to sell beef direct to consumer, let's use beef instead. Let's say Althoff Beef instead. And again, like domain, choosing your website is a delicate balance between, like, you don't want it too long, you don't want it hard to spell, whatever. But I might say Althoff is hard to spell anyway, so we would forget that probably. But we could do like OldHoffIowaBeef.com, which again, like, helps for people looking for Iowa beef. It might be more likely to pop up in search that way, right?
Yeah, agreed. And I have multiple friends who are cattle ranchers or, smaller farming operations where they raise cattle. And the example I have in mind for this is most of their beef goes into the grocery store pipeline, but their living cattle genetics are like the beef is almost a side effect.
Right. If they're not selling the beef direct to consumer, then it's different, right?
Yeah. So they'll occasionally sell freezer beef, but most of their beef actually is going into the grocery store pipeline. Their big seller is actually the genetics, the replacement heifers, the bulls that they raise. And they market those two things very differently. And I've heard of producers that will actually have two different websites for those two different business segments.
We recommend that.
Yeah, here is our cattle ranch where you can come and you can visit bulls that are going to be at auction and you can see them walking around in the pasture and get a feel for their body comp. Here's the ranch where you come and look at possible replacement heifers or even established cows. Here's you can come see our donors out in the pasture before we, start selling their eggs or embryos. Or here's our website where we're selling really high quality beef. And a lot of the times those are very different types of ranches. Like I think a lot of the more commercial ranchers just operate with a different business model than say you're doing direct to consumer beef. But there are situations where one single operation will do both of those things. I do recommend segmenting your marketing if you can.
We totally recommend that too, because you're not speaking to the same audience. Like you said earlier, the same people that want to buy Duroc piglets are not the same people that want to buy Duroc pork most of the time, And so it's really hard, whether it's your website, it's your social media, like it's really hard to talk to both of those audiences without confusing one or the other. So
we know farmers tend to be serial entrepreneurs as well. So I have friends that have like 5 or 6 different websites based on the way their different like subsets of their business are. Like, oh, yeah, our main business is, beef genetics, but we also sell, some freezer beef now and then. And also now our son is doing hydroponics and 4-H, and it's become big enough that he's selling direct to consumer and distributing to grocery stores. So he's got his own website. And our, don't get me started in the sheep space where you have fibers and meat and genetics. Like sheep is a whole different ball of wax because there's even more products on the table then.
let's talk really briefly about platforms, website platforms. This is something that, I mean, I know which website platforms are user friendly for me to set up a website that then can be managed by a farmer butcher shop, you know? And I will say, even when I was a mommy blogger, I did not use WordPress. I have used it. I never liked it. It was never user friendly for me. But I know that WordPress for a really long time was favored for SEO type purposes for food bloggers and things.
So WordPress is still the most widely used website platform in the world for good reason. It's got a lot of features and capabilities, but it's also got a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah. I don't love it. I never found it very easy to use. Maybe it's gotten better over the years. That often happens with technology, right? But what about when we're talking about like Squarespace, Wix? Are there platforms that you see that are better than others that are user friendly and better for SEO?
Yeah, so I want to address Wix first, simply because there's some myths and misconceptions around Wix. So about 10 years ago, Wix had a real bad time. I want to say it was in 2015 where most of the Wix online inventory of websites was completely scrubbed from Google because they were considered shady. And it was just some Wix business practices of not vetting who was creating websites and what the quality was. Basically, anyone could stand up a site. There was no QA going on. There was a ton of inflation of just lower quality content coming out of Wix. So Google did some wholesale sort of penalties. We have come a long way since then. Wix is actually now these days one of the best website builder platforms for entry level users. So when we're talking about websites that are low risk and user friendly to build a website on, if you're not a web expert, typically I go Squarespace or Wix. The cons to that is you are using someone else's platform. So there's a lot less customization. There's a lot less ability to kind of make it your own. You can still do a lot of incredible stuff. They're beautiful websites, but say you want some advanced features rolled out, like, I actually run the website for a running club here in Kansas City. 4 years ago, when I built the website, Squarespace did not have the features I needed for them to manage their membership. So I built their initial website on WordPress. So you run into situations like that where there's maybe some more advanced features that Squarespace or Wix isn't quite ready to provide, or there's customizations that you want that they don't offer. But those are pretty specific use cases. Where I think the benefits are they're stable. You're not going to break them very easily. You almost have to try to break Squarespace sites. And from a tech standpoint, you don't have to know a whole lot to be able to build something that's both beautiful and functional. Both of them provide e-commerce support. I mean, we've built some e-commerce sites together on Squarespace. Can't remember if we've worked on Wix together.
I prefer Squarespace. I think it's more user friendly, although we've used Wix before too. The one when you talk about limitations, I will just warn people that if you are going to ship your meat and you want to do some creative, like free shipping on this order amount or things like that, that's where I've seen limitations in Squarespace for sure, and probably Wix as well. So if you're doing e-commerce and you want to do subscriptions, or you want to do, some of the more advanced e-commerce things, it can get tricky.
So having worked on some of the largest e-commerce sites out there, so for those who don't know, I was the SEO strategist for Hallmark.com for 4 years. So worked on some big websites and know a thing or two about online retail. Anytime you're talking about a time sensitive product like meat, perishables of any sort, shipping is going to be tricky no matter the platform. It's just about figuring out how to make it work for you and how to set up those configurations. But to your point, the way you structure promotions around shipping gets even more complicated. So yes, that's one of the watchouts with Wix and Squarespace. Situations where maybe that's not a good fit is if you know you have a very large catalog of products to be uploading, in which case you may want to look at something like Shopify instead of Squarespace or Wix. Shopify exists just for online retail. It's not always they're not always like the most aesthetically pleasing websites. They're not ugly, but you're not gonna like open a box and have an absolutely gorgeous website to start off with like you would Squarespace. But Shopify has the technical systems in place to create a really stable environment. And you do have, like to Katie's point, you have more capabilities when it comes to things like shippings and promo and all of the various little like informational pipelines you have to set up for things like point of sale and taxation and all this stuff. But it is a much more manual process and you need a little bit more tech know-how. Then one step past Shopify on the complexity scale is WordPress. And like I said, WordPress is the most widely used website platform in the world for a good reason. It's got a lot of great capabilities. It's got a lot of great potential, but I typically advocate if you are trying to build a business on WordPress, work with an expert. I help with WordPress. I work with several developers that help with even more advanced WordPress work than what I do. And, there are some pitfalls. That said, for every setback that you have with WordPress, there's a capability available there that you can't do on any other platform without, coding stuff yourself.
Yeah, which is, I would say with most of the farmers and butcher shops that we work with, if they are wanting to sell online, my first step is I'm going to see if they're a good fit for ChopLocal. We're coming up on an hour already, and we haven't even talked about all of the little things that you've helped us put in place on ChopLocal. We have alt text for every image. Our vendors don't have to type that in. We do that for them. We have the URLs that are set up to include the keywords as part of our page structure. You've done some technical stuff that's like way over my head about how Google reads the site, and canonicalization is something new that I learned about this year through you.
I think that's like a 200 level episode.
Yeah. We're not going to even get into that. Image sizes, we've done that. And then we also did not talk in this episode about like backlinks and having multiple pages about the same topic. Those are all things that ChopLocal has that are hard for, honestly, it's hard for individual farms to compete with ChopLocal's SEO because of the fact that we have all of these other things in place. But anyway, we could continue talking to Kelly for so long about everything SEO, but I think that we're going to have to stop here and go, maybe bring her back on another episode. Thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.